Videos like these are made possible by viewers like you, who support the channel through Patreon, channel memberships, and stream donations. And don't forget to check out the Bad Weapon Rehabilitation servers at www.badweaponrehab.tf. Check the links in the description for more information, and let's get into the video. Yeah, I'm revisiting a weapon I've already covered. That's not against the TF2 YouTube rules. It's just that usually no one bothers with these sorts of things anymore unless their opinion has radically changed, because it's not like the weapons are changing anytime soon. So has my opinion on the Scorch Shot changed? No, not really. I still don't like this thing and I think it's way too strong. If that's all you came for, you can leave now. Pyro's upset by the fact that nobody likes it when neither of the primary weapons you have equipped take any skill to use. Can leave your copy-pasted comments at the door, and my secretary will be reading through them post-haste. Okay, now that they're all gone, us normal folk can have a conversation. Well, a mostly one-sided conversation. I'm the only one talking here. So why am I making this video? I've said my piece about the Scorch Shot, and hell, it's a perspective that most people seem to agree with, to the point that disputing the Scorch Shot's overpoweredness is the hot take. For one thing, the old video on the Scorch Shot has been demonetized for some time because I said a very naughty word. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that? Like, you know, what's the worst part of being a TF2 YouTuber? Well, probably dealing with all those filthy So yeah, I'd like to get money for complaining about this weapon again, because that's the sort of thing you can get away with when you become a TF2 YouTuber. But moreover, I wanted to go over a few things that I covered in my last video on the Scorch Shot, because while I agree with the overall conclusion of that video, I feel like the points I made weren't the strongest, and there were plenty of things I didn't articulate as well as I would have liked, and I wanted to rebut a few points made against that video. Starting with what I think is the biggest one. Everything I say about the Scorch Shot is invalidated automatically because I main Sniper. This is probably my favorite comment to get that I am completely sick of reading. Mainly because it implies one of two things from the viewer. One, that they sat through about 14 minutes of the video nodding their heads along to everything that was said and finding it perfectly agreeable, only to then discover that I main the evil class that gets so effortlessly countered by the weapon, despite that class also being completely overpowered and having no counterplay. Ignore that cognitive dissonance. So all of that agreement gets flushed out of their brains and everything I say was invalidated because I am clearly biased. Or two, that they were absolutely seething behind their keyboards but couldn't actually refute anything I had to say, and had no choice but to go for the low-hanging fruit as soon as I mentioned my main. Now this is difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, but Sniper is actually not the only class I ever play. That's not what maining a class means. I play other classes, quite frequently in fact. As a matter of fact, most of my time in this game has been spent not playing Sniper, but I still think the Scorch Shot is as badly designed as it is. And you know what? Fuck it. Here's a real hot take. Sniper is one of the classes that is least affected by the Scorch Shot next to Pyro himself. So all of you Pyros in the comments section who say that you use the Scorch Shot specifically to screw over snipers, guess what? The only snipers you're doing anything to are either morons, incredibly stubborn, or else so new to the game that they can't just do this and turn your weapon and entire class off with a single click of a button. Now don't get me wrong, I still hate the danger shield as a weapon design. I think it's stupid that Sniper can just turn off an entire class more or less, and it's a massive crutch in the vast majority of situations. But hey, as far as I'm concerned, if your brain is being turned off at the expense of everyone else's fun, then two can play at that game. Sorry every other Pyro on the enemy team, one guy had to ruin all the fun for you and that's why we can't have nice things. Combine the very existence of the danger shield with the fact that Sniper is consistently the farthest away from the front lines and so gets a chance to actually dodge the projectile and at the very least avoid direct hits, and that a lot of his best sightlines are next to resupply, a health pack, or an engineer nest, or more than one of those. And yeah, sure, you'll get plenty of picks on stupid snipers and annoy the shit out of a lot more, but only just long enough for the actually threatening ones to put a stop to your chicanery. You know who really gets fucked over by the Scorch Shot? Heavies. They're the easiest targets to hit with the thing. It takes them forever to get in the proper position, and even when they do get in the proper position, they have to rev up, which makes them even easier to hit. And by the time all that happens, you just knock them about 30 yards away, even further out of their effective range, and of course the weapon is so disposable and fast firing that you can just keep spamming them into complete and utter uselessness, turning the heavy's attempts to simply get to the front lines at all into a Sisyphean effort of futility. So yeah, my main has a brain-dead piece of shit weapon that turns your brain-dead piece of shit weapon into a mildly spicy spitball gun, and one of my least played classes in the game is the one who gets screwed over by this thing the absolute hardest, and I still can't stand it. Wrap your head around that one and see where the bias actually lies. And that brain-dead weapon removes Pyro's ability to deal one-shot damage with a single flare, which was something else that I noticed people had an issue with me pointing out. I had at least a couple of people point out that just because the Scorch Shot has the potential to deal one-shot damage to light classes, that doesn't mean it'll be able to consistently pull this off. I mean, the amount of time that it takes even a light class to burn to death is pretty significant, so they can just run to a health pack or a dispenser or a medic or whatever well before they burn to death. And that is absolutely correct. You're probably not going to get those 125 to death hits on a light class. The problem is they have to run back to a health pack or a dispenser or a medic or whatever every single time they're hit by a bouncing flare. If you're a light class and you get hit by a bouncing flare mini crit, boom, you're on a ticking clock until you die. You can stop that clock relatively easily for the most part, but if you get hit again, you're right back where you started. What this means is that every single double hit with the Scorch Shot is essentially a forced retreat, if they can survive the effects of the stun long enough to retreat in the first place. Even on healthier classes like Demo or Soldier, you're still better off going back and healing up than continuing a fight where by the end of it, you'll be at 50 to 75 health if you're lucky. That's assuming one of the Pyro's teammates doesn't hit you with basically anything, or the Pyro himself doesn't hit you with another flare, which is incredibly easy and spammy and disposable. So factor that in with just how much work a single flare is doing by hitting someone, and you can see the problem here. At least I hope you can. Ultimately, the potential to one-shot or cripple enemies with no effort involved whatsoever is all it needs to be incredibly oppressive, and that's where the problem lies. Not the implication that every single shot you hit with this thing is a guaranteed death. Okay, one other thing that's less of a refutation and more of a clarification. I had some pretty choice words for Pyros who use the Scorch Shot, and plenty of people came into the comments of that video saying they don't use the Scorch Shot in the annoying way that everyone else uses it in, and prefer to use it supportively, or that they don't have any other unlocks, or they genuinely had no idea that the weapon was as overpowered as it was. You guys are not who I'm talking about. If you use the Scorch Shot just at all, that's not an instant condemnation, and you're probably not going to hell for it. Probably. I haven't asked God how he feels about it yet. Alright, question. First of all, is there any point in you living? Second question. Wait. Oh, shit. Yep!
Third question, am I going to heaven? No.
If you like using it as a more supportive tool to help out your engineers, or don't have any other unlocks, who cares? Go for it, that's not a problem. I would still advise that those supportive pyros give the detonator a shot, but whatever works for them. My choice words are for the people out there who know exactly what they're doing. The people who know exactly how broken the weapon is, how unfun it is, and get off on the fact that they're ruining the fun for everyone else on the server, because as I so often see in the comments of my old Scorch Shot video, and a concerning sentiment I see everywhere more and more regularly, why should I care if my enemies are having any fun? What a self-report of a statement that is. Holding people in contempt because they happen to be assigned to the opposing team in a video game by pure chance, and deciding that you get to have all the fun, and they don't deserve to have any because they are your enemies. I guarantee you'll never see these people apologizing to anyone they were trashing when they happen to get auto-balanced onto their team, or if they meet those people again on their team in a new server. You should care if your enemies are having fun, because this is a fucking video game that people play to have fun, and it's generally a good thing to not be an asshole. Waging war against good people is bad for the soul. This isn't a competitive tournament where you have to win at all costs by any means necessary, but the fuckers who say this shit wouldn't know anything about that to begin with, because people who play competitive need to have good aim and game sense and can't use the Scorch Shot. What I'm trying to say is, You're not Conan the Barbarian? You don't need to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of their women? You're playing the easiest damaging class in a video game about hats. Chill the fuck out. Now let's pivot to a different topic. I think I ultimately spent too much time in the last video talking about what ultimately ends up being the least important aspect of the Scorch Shot's imbalance, and that's the splash damage and splash ignite. Don't get me wrong, it's still dead easy and completely mindless to rack up loads of risk-free fire damage, but that's honestly the least of the Scorch Shot's problems. If the Scorch Shot was just a flare gun with a damage penalty and a splash radius upon impacting a surface or player, then I would have to concede that the Scorch Shot is what many of its defenders say it is. Not overpowered, just annoying. The splash also isn't as all-encompassing as I might have made it out to be, and as a shoot-at-the-ground spam tool, it's actually a bit more situational. The Scorch Shot works best in defensive positions, especially when you're on high ground, since that gives you the best possible vantage point over your enemies, and makes getting all those splash hits the easiest. If you're on low ground looking up at your enemies, unless they're backed up against a wall, you're gonna have a harder time getting cheap and easy splash damage on them, and will actually have to hit a direct. And in these situations, the detonator is actually going to be your better option for splash damage, assuming you can actually time your detonations, since it can hit splash damage shots that the Scorch Shot simply can't. And on the subject of downsides the Scorch Shot has, it being so brainless, safe, and easy to use can actually work to your detriment, since it can put you in a false sense of security and give you tunnel vision on whatever choke point it is you're spamming into, meaning you're actually decently vulnerable to the spies you don't catch out by complete accident. But let's circle back to that whole you need to hit a direct thing, because that's where all of the Scorch Shot's problems really lie. Stuns are bullshit. Long-range stuns are especially bullshit. Long-range spammable stuns that apply damage over time are stage 4 rectal cancer. All I'm saying is if this shit was an Overwatch instead of TF2, there would not be a single person defending it. And even players who currently defend the weapon would say that anything even remotely like it shouldn't be added to TF2. The stun is the absolute worst part of the Scorch Shot, and the simple removal of this mechanic would instantly make the weapon at least balanced. The stun is what enables the bouncing flare to deal as much damage as it does so consistently. If there were no stun, the bouncing flare wouldn't be nearly as big of an issue, because you could simply walk away from it without having been juggled into the air with all of your momentum halted. If you got hit by the bouncing flare, it would be your fault, and I think that's fine. There's nothing wrong with punishing inattentive players, that's why Spy exists in the first place. It would still be brainless and spammy, but at least then it would just be annoying and not infuriating. I still wouldn't like it, and I almost certainly wouldn't use it often, but if I did, I wouldn't feel nearly as bad as I do when I completely halt a person's momentum right as they're about to reach a health pack and watch them burn to death, or stun a scout in midair and watch him fall helplessly to the ground in slow motion as he comes to regret every choice made in his life. Because what are they even supposed to do in that situation? I think the biggest comparison to make here is with the loose cannon, since on paper that's a very similar weapon. It's an explosive that uses a double hit mechanic in tandem with knockback in order to deal extra mini crit damage, where the knockback is what enables the double hit to occur in the first place. Yeah, even I can't help but compare the Scorch Shot to primary weapons, I'm sorry. The main differences here are that 1, the loose cannon has a clip and needs to reload. 2, the loose cannon has a massive range disadvantage, and in fact has the worst range of any of the grenade launchers, forget the effectively infinite range of the Scorch Shot. 3, the loose cannon's knockback is far more actionable than the Scorch Shot, which acts much more like a stun, especially when the demo mistimes his donk, which can allow you to surf to safety well outside of the loose cannon's range. And 4, the loose cannon's double donks take precision aim and timing, compared to the Scorch Shot where the double hit is so random, unpredictable, and inconsistent that you can get double hit mini crits on pyros without even trying if you're lucky. Sometimes the bouncing flare is reasonably escapable. Sometimes it impacts the ground beneath you basically instantaneously and there's no escaping that mini crit. Every time you get hit by this thing, it's like a little roulette wheel. It's like random crits if they stunned you first. Are we absolutely positive this isn't an Overwatch weapon? And I'm gonna wrap things up with the conclusion I came to in my last video, and that I still agree with. The Scorch Shot is a broken, overpowered weapon. But when people hear that, I don't know if we're all thinking the same thing in regards to what that means for the weapon. If a weapon is broken and overpowered to this degree, that must mean it's one of the strongest weapons in the game, right? No, not really. The Scorch Shot is overpowered not because it's flat out stronger than most of the weapons in the game, but because of what kind of weapon it is, what it's capable of doing, and what you give up in order to achieve that. Like, I'll be honest, I don't think the Scorch Shot is a stronger weapon than the stock flamethrower. And you're not going to hear me call that overpowered. I mean, you'll hear some people call it overpowered, but not me. There are a lot of perfectly balanced weapons that are stronger than the Scorch Shot, and some that are, while still arguably a bit too strong, far less contentious in their designs. But you have to consider what kind of weapon the Scorch Shot is and what class it's on. The Scorch Shot is a pyro secondary weapon, and in that category, it's completely unmatched. The flare gun, I would say, is the only contender, and that requires such a high skill ceiling to get on the same level of raw damage output as the Scorch Shot that it's just not a fair competition. It's like comparing a world-class archer to a drunk guy throwing rocks at a fence. That archer is pretty fucking good, and it's certainly a lot more interesting and satisfying to watch, but, you know, any idiot can pick up a rock and hit something with it. Hell, a lot of the time you'll hit something by accident. Is the Scorch Shot the strongest weapon in the game? No, not a chance. It's not even in the top 10. But I would have to actually make that list in order to prove it. Is the Scorch Shot stronger than any other pyro secondary? Incredibly easy to use and requires you to give up basically nothing in order to get a slew of benefits from it? Yeah, and that's what makes it overpowered. So when I talk about overpowered weapons, with a couple of exceptions, the odds are it's going to be like this. Too strong for its slot, and doesn't require you to give up anything like a side grade ideally should. In a similar boat to the Scorch Shot. Ideally a boat that's floating down the river Styx.
You want to talk about fucking brain dead easy to use? How many people did I hit there with like a couple of flares? Oh no. Patented Skinner burgers. Old family recipe.